e pe e moera. E runga ua koe tō tupuna waine tai o ora. E tai o ora.
Sharon, Tristan, thank you so much for joining me today. As we, this has been really exciting for us to put together MFEM's Legacy Series, where we start from self-governance and we work our way through the highlights of our economic journey. And they have been highs and they have been lows, but they have been important lessons, and they're important lessons that we need to share with our people so they understand them, and hopefully it'll allow us to think about these, and hopefully we won't make the same mistakes and we'll improve how we do things in the future. And so, it's been a journey for you coming in as the economic analyst, and now you're leading the economic planning division as the director at MFEM. What first sparked the interest in this kind of work for you, and what's kept the drive? What's been your passion going all these years?
Yeah, thanks, Aileen. And thanks for inviting me to come down and have a chat on this sort of stuff. Definitely didn't have to strong arm me at all, so that's great. Yeah, it's interesting to look back. So I first came to the Cooks almost 10 years ago now. So
wow.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
And what sort of driven the interest, well, firstly in economics is, one, I'm a big nerd.
Yeah.
I find economics is a really powerful way to explain why things are the way they are, and why different things are sort of turn out the way they are. So that led me to ultimately study economics and get into the field. And the opportunity arose to move to the Cooks initially. I moved here and I love the place. Like, everybody talks to the Cooks talks about lovely beaches and beautiful place to be, and all that's true. But the real selling point for me has been, at least in my professional career, is how exciting the work is and how interesting the work is. One of the challenges we have is we're a small organisation.
Yeah.
Like everyone in the Cooks is part of a small organisation, but that means you get to do really fascinating work, and you get hands dirty into lots of sort of policy work and practitioner work, and that is something you just can't find in a lot of other places, and particularly in bigger places like Australia or New Zealand.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps the motivation going, because when you get big challenges pop up, things like COVID-19, and I know other people in the series have talked about 96, 97, those things are really sort of scary challenges and really difficult moments. But from an economics point of view, it's also really fascinating, because you get to tackle the big problems and try and make things work. And the ability, or the opportunity in the Cooks to do that is much better and much greater than you'll find elsewhere. So that makes it really easy to keep the motivation high and that sort of stuff.
And then moving on to COVID, and when the Cook Islands faced its big challenge from the economic crisis, how that was handled with depopulation, and then looking at COVID and the tough decisions that had to be made to keep the economy afloat. What were some of the hardest calls during that time, and what lessons came out of those experiences?
There's lots of hard calls during that time.
Yeah.
I think, and firstly, I'd like to give a lot of credit to Natalie Cook, who was the director of EPD at the time, and she did incredible work in leading the economic response plan and all the work there in terms to get out support quickly and get it to individuals, get it to businesses, and working out sort of how much we could spend and where to spend it, some of the hard stuff. Probably at a personal level, some of the decisions I was more deeply involved in that were difficult was when to turn off the tap on that support.
Yeah.
I think in retrospect, we got it pretty right. We had it for a few months after borders reopened to give people time to get back on their feet, and then slowly sort of stepped it out. That, I think, the economic response plan and the support through wage subsidies, business grants, everything else, have been incredibly successful. Given the size of that recession is sort of huge, we had GDP contract to over 40%, and despite that, we had relatively few business closures, relatively low unemployment, and not as much sort of immigration as we might have expected. I think also part of that story as to why we got through it so well is we were in a really good spot beforehand.
Yeah.
Contrast that to 96, 97, where we didn't have a lot of resources. We didn't have a lot of powder dry in the cupboard.
Yeah.
We were in
a good 6 months. We had 6 months left of funds left before we were just goners.
Exactly. We're in a lot of trouble back then. And when COVID hit, we had the stabilisation fund.
Mm-hmm.
Our debt levels were pretty low, so we could take on debt to help support people. And we're in a good position where development partners, particularly New Zealand, had confidence in our systems to be able to help us through that stuff.
Yeah, that is so good, and it really is a success story when you think about it. And so I know during that time, all government workers, you know, they were still on their full pay, and that really helped keep the economy in balance.
And that was a conscious choice too.
Yeah.
There was certainly commentary around oh, maybe government workers should take a hit and these kind of things. Particularly for retail businesses and that sort of stuff as well. If we start taking a hit to government salaries there, that's going to be felt by your cafes, your restaurants, supermarkets, all those kind of things, because nobody else has the ability to spend as well.
Yeah.
That was a conscious choice to keep money in the economy.
Yeah, no, that's really great. You guys did such a great job.
You know, the height of the asset protection world for the Cook Islands was in the 1990s. The trust companies were massive, and they were generating a lot of revenue, tax revenue for the Cook Islands. So it was incredibly important for the Cook Islands. And if we remember the downsizing years, you know, this is when the offshore industry was really needed, and it was there.
Yeah.
You know, so no, let's thank those people with visions back in the 1980s for creating this industry, because it was there when the Cook Islands needed it to be. Now, of course, we fast forward to the COVID era. Again, a lot of the tourism-related industries were suffering. There was no tax revenue going to government except from the offshore.
Oh my goodness.
Except from the offshore
Yeah.
industry. So we propped up the economy when we were needed to. So that's something that people don't quite appreciate about the offshore industry and the contribution that we've made.
Before the COVID, everybody was doing well. The tourists was coming, and everybody was, the fishermen was doing well, the farmers were doing well. Everybody was doing well, and so was the public servants and the private sectors. And then suddenly we were shut down when we didn't expect that. Well, I'm talking for myself now, because we had hydroponics and we cater for the hotels, and we were planting, and my son was saying, oh, we got to do this so we can supply consistently to the hotels. So we did that. Next minute, bang, COVID. Border shut down. No tourists, nobody in the hotels. And look at all our hydroponics full of vegetables. They were all ready. And I looked at this and I said to my son, oh, what are we going to do with this? And he said, well, Mom, we can't do much. We have to throw it away, whatever. And then I thought, oh no, there's people on the island. That's when I thought of that nice thought to pack all the lettuces and deliver them from home to home. That's the first time I went from home to home in all the villages. And then we set up, the island set up a task force for each constituency. Amudi Task Force, Amudi Ureia, and then Arinikau, and then Vai Tau. So I delivered the lettuces to the punang, to each punang on the island, and then I go around to the homes where I can get through. And that's the first time I've seen a lot of homes on the island. I've never been to some of the homes before, and yet I live on the island, but I've never seen their houses. It was very, I was very happy that I did that.
Yeah.
And I delivered the lettuces to the mamas, papas, and they were so happy because there's no market for our vegetables. Not only me, and many farmers too. Everybody was giving.
Yeah.
For example, You got bunches of bananas. You give me bunches of bananas and I give you a box of lettuces or cucumbers. Everybody was doing that on the island. That's how beautiful it is.
That's really nice. And
so we went through that. It was so nice.
That's nice. And I've heard so many stories about that during COVID. So even though we didn't have the tourists coming to the islands, that's when our people came together to help each other.
Even the fishermen, when they catch plenty fish, they share. And then for us, we give the veggies to the fishermen and they give us some fish. And nearly the people on the island was very bonding during the COVID time.
When the rainy day came, you know, we had quite a good war chest, you know, so, I mean, I congratulate all of those governments from, you know, pretty much 96 up until 2020 for putting aside that money for a rainy day. And so when I compare, you know, if we're looking at the COVID pandemic, like just for Aitutaki, for example, if there was another pandemic in the world, this is the best place to be. Hopefully government could afford to support us as they did. I mean, you know, we got our minimum wage, which was $200, $280 a week, and then it went to $306, which was fantastic. You know, we got a raise. But the way that the community got together, you know, was incredible for the Cook Islands. And then it meant that for our tourism industry, as soon as the borders opened again, even for that brief period with New Zealand only, we just took off. We were ready to go. It wasn't like, you know, some of my friends who have resorts in Samoa were just bankrupt, you know. So they're now in a very deep hole and trying to climb their way out. And those are huge challenges, you know. Whereas the Cook Islands, we were very, very blessed, very blessed.
And during COVID, I was in Moke, and so we had the borders shut down. We didn't have anyone coming in apart from food. And in Raro, we had everything shutting down, but people were taking that time to actually sit around their houses, maintain things, build gardens. So even though, and people were saying they didn't miss tourists, you know, they actually liked having that peace and quiet, and they spent more time with their families. And so, and even in Raro, they were having staycations. So, you know, the hotels, even though they weren't making as much money, they were using that time to fix themselves up, and they were still covering costs. So how was that in Aitutaki?
Well, it was, yeah, I mean, you know, the sentiments are pretty much the same. I mean, everybody, they enjoyed the break. We enjoyed tourism, but, you know, we took time to formalize our plans. So Te Papatau o Araura, the 30-year plan, was completed during that period. And it was really interesting, the sentiments around not necessarily capping tourism, but slowing it down. And slowing it down until there's to reserve every opportunity for Aitutakians to come home. You know, and in my new role as the mayor for the island, that's clearly one of our goals, is ensuring that all the opportunities that remain on Aitutaki within tourism and even in other industries are reserved for our people. You know, we don't have to progress for progress' sake. We'll leave it there. They're in Melbourne, they're in Sydney, they're in Auckland, and they look back and then we say, look, when you're ready to come, this is yours.
In 1996, 1997, nobody expected what was coming. And it just hit us just like that. You fast forward to COVID, there was a lot of transparency. People were more involved. Yes, people were scared, just as they were struggling in 1996, 1997, but there was so much more transparency. So whilst they were scared, they knew what to expect. And we were part of the decisions that were made. So transparency is a word that I like using all the time, because I think that when people understand what's going on, they will be scared, but maybe less scared.
So when we contrast it with the rapid emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic, we were in a better place. We had, and I'll give you examples of what reflects good PFM. We had just put $57 million in the stabilization fund.
Wow.
In June 1990 for the rainy day that came 8 months later. Okay? So we had done that. We hadn't wasted money, put it aside. Our reserves were healthy. We had something like $90 million sitting in the reserves. So when we saw COVID coming, and I was sitting in Canberra at a meeting there, and I watched the international borders shutting down, I knew tourism is gone. Like everybody else here, they knew tourism was gone. But in fact, the first meeting I came back, I went to, actually, it was in early March 2020. I had my first meeting with, late Feb, early March, I had my first meeting with Chamber of Commerce, and I told them, don't worry, we've got good reserves set aside. We can hold the fort for a period of time at which we will look at, do an assessment and look at how we need to address this impending disaster. So we had moral ascendancy, we had money, and we had a little bit of time, so we started making decisions for ourselves. We were able, as COVID came closer, to understand the impacts on the economy with the loss of tourism arrival. We were able to design the economic and health measures to address COVID because we could cost them. And you know, if we can cost them, impact was severe. We costed the remedies. We had the reserves to finance the remedies. And when we were running short, we had the relationship and credibility to talk to development partners about grants and debt financing. And we were able to connect with the communities, with Chamber of Commerce, the private sector task force, the House of Ariki. We communicated with the community. Again, this is about good PFM. We communicated with the community to say, guys, this is what's happening, this is the impact, this is how we're going to deal with it, and this is how much it's going to cost, and this is how much money we're going to keep in your pocket to make sure you're calm, stable, and we'll survive this thing.
Yeah.
And I think we did it with credibility. So that's the difference between, did we have good public finance management principles, framework, pre-96, 97? I suspect not. Did we have it in place pre-COVID? I'm fairly confident we did.
Yeah. So, and what you were saying that the Cook Islands punches above its weight on the global stage. What was one movement during your time as Financial Secretary where you really felt pride about how far our small island country has come?
I think, without doubt, it's, we have a natural propensity not to pat ourselves on the shoulder, even as a country.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, our success in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, I go everywhere and people just admiration for what we did. So our national efforts, working together to provide the necessary economic and health measures to come through COVID-19 and re-emerge as a vibrant economy is extraordinary. And when we look at what are the extraordinary things in there, it's like our ability, well, first of all, having the reserves, our ability to own our problem and our solution. The rollout of economic measures, I think it was 2 days after New Zealand rolled this out. We knew this. The relationships we built with the Chamber of Commerce, the private sector task force, the willingness of the community to work with us, the communications update, the formulation of policy by speech, those things are extraordinary. The fact we got 97% vaccination rate, which equated to one death, that's, it's extraordinary. I think we shouldn't forget this. This is, I was very proud. I'm still proud.
Yeah.
When it's raised, I still feel proud.
Tuki teni tarai ara ko tō mate kino mō. Te kere ti te rutuki mate kaka ari ki te matai o. Ua pōkia I te kārere. Pōpongi ori e taiti moketa, te taiti moketa. E rei rātu e tūtakai ato ke o.